argued something, I remember something called the quantity theory of monetary policy. In fact, you used to have a license plate that said what?
I still do.
You still do. All right. What is it? It's
MV equals P.
MV, which is a formula for that.
Money times velocity equals price times output.
Exactly. All right. But is that the central contribution you have made to economic thought?
Well, I have a little. That is part of it. I don't like to judge my own. I like to leave that to other people.
This is from the new federal chairman said before he was appointed, Ben Bernanke. Friedman's monetary framework has been so influential that in its broad outlines it has nearly become identical with modern monetary theory. That says it right there.
Yeah, I think that's a correct statement.
And that is the principal contribution.
Well, that's a contribution that probably has the most practical effect. But you see, when you talk about a contribution to economic theory, the things I've done in the field of consumption, theory of consumption,
right.
Things I've done about choices under uncertainty. There are various technical things I've done in economics that, from the point of view of economic theory, are probably more important.
You've argued that consumption theory is more important. You think it's the most important thing you've done.
No, not that it's the most important. That it's scientifically the best thing I've done.
Okay. Let me talk about people. I want you to assess people. I mean, someone once said to me, well, if you're 93, you got nothing to worry about.
I've got a hell of a lot to worry about.
Yeah, but not at that. I want to mention names and tell me what you think. Tell me what their value is, why you, sum them up. Ronald Reagan.
He was a great man, no question, because he was a man of principle, and he stuck by his principles and lived by his principles. And he was, as a person, of course, he was a charming person. Everybody who knew him loved him. Nobody who could tell stories the way he could tell them.
How important is he to the success of, quote, the conservative movement in America in the last 25 years of the previous century?
He's tremendously important. I think he and Margaret Thatcher, between them, have been the most influential proponents of free markets and free enterprise in the last century.
In the last century, the most. Where is Barry Goldwater?
Well, Barry Goldwater was an original. Barry Goldwater, like Ronald Reagan, was a person of principle, who was willing to stick to principles and not. It was a tragedy that JFK got assassinated, because if it had been Goldwater versus JFK, John F. Kennedy.
Right.
They were good friends.
Right.
They liked one another.
Right.
It would have been a good-spirited thing. It would not have been a mean, nasty kind of an election, as it actually was with Johnson.
And who do you think would have won?
I think Kennedy would have won.
Yeah.
But it would have been a much closer thing. But Goldwater almost pulled out of the race after Kennedy was assassinated.
I know he did.
And but I think he was a great man.
Richard Nixon.
One of the smartest people I've ever met. There's no doubt that if you were to judge the presidents by pure IQ, I think Nixon would come at the top. Not very much above Reagan. Reagan had a very high IQ too. He was much maligned by the people who thought he was a movie actor, couldn't be very smart. But Nixon, however, did not have the same was not as principled as he. I used to say that our principles were his prejudices.
Your principles were his prejudices.
That if nothing was at stake, he would go do that. But it only took a low price, a low reward in terms of politics, for him to willing to go above his principles.
You never forgave him for wage and price controls?
Never. No, I never did.
I mean, you thought it was just a sellout of the highest order.
Well, the last time I saw him was not long after wage and price controls, and that was the last time I saw him.
Right after that.
Right after that.
Jimmy Carter.
Well, I never had any contact with Jimmy Carter. I have no competence to judge that.
You admire his post-presidency?
Some parts of it. The house building, yes.
Yeah, the habitat.
The habitat.
All right.
But
Bill Clinton, President Clinton, who presided over 8 years of economic success.
Yes, he did.
And dramatically reduced the deficit.
Yes.
Left a surplus.
Yes, that's right.
That's a good thing?
Yeah. Well, let's see what the reason behind it was. The reason behind it was you had a Democrat as a president, and you had Republicans in command at least of at least one house, and then of both houses.
Right.
During his regime, and so you had gridlock, and that's why you had such good fiscal performance.
Because there wasn't that much spending?
Yeah, because they couldn't agree. See, the best thing to hold down spending is to have a Democratic president and a Republican Congress.
I saw someone last night, and I said, I'm going out to see you and George Shultz, and they said, you lucky man. That's what they said to me. Because you two are viewed as men of integrity, and people disagree or agree with your ideas. But you have been strong in your beliefs and have an engaging personality. The one thing that it seems to me you have cared passionately about, and I don't know where it stands, but tell me why you're so committed to vouchers and changing public education.
Well, I'm no more committed to that than I am to 100 other things.
No, really not. I mean, I thought that was sort of one of that was the top of your list.
But it's one thing in which I happen to have gotten involved and in which I see some chance of doing something. But I think it's a very important issue because I think the U.S. is suffering greatly from the defects of its educational system. We have a system in which a quarter or more of the youngsters never graduate from high school. We're creating an underclass by the defects of our educational system. And it's not and the reason for those defects, the fundamental reason for those defects, is that we have a government monopoly, that something like 85% of our kids go to government-run schools.
No competition.
No competition. It's a monopoly, and it's a monopoly that's been taken over by the teachers' unions, which have tremendous influence. Probably the strongest political force in the United States today are the teachers' unions. Something like a quarter or so of the delegates to the Democratic presidential nominating convention were members of the.
How many?
I think about nearly
25%.
It may be a little less than that. I won't say, but a very large fraction. And it's so obvious how you ought to cure it. As after all, what government wants to do, in this case is a valid function of government, is to promote education. It doesn't want to promote buildings. It doesn't want to promote schools. It wants to promote schooling. Well, if you're going to promote schooling and you're going to spend money, if you're going to subsidize it, you ought to subsidize the school, not the schools, but the students. Instead, we subsidize schools. Look at it in general. You want to subsidize anything. Do you want to subsidize the producers of that thing or the consumers? If you subsidize the producers,